Amina was a young Nigerian woman who grew up in a small village. Life had never been kind to her. Her father had passed away when she was very little, and her mother struggled to raise her and her younger sister. Every day in the village was a battle for food, water, and survival. Still, Amina carried a warm heart and a quiet strength. She believed that no matter how poor she was, she had a responsibility to care for her family, especially her little sister, Zara. When Amina turned 19, she made a brave decision. She left her village and traveled to the city, hoping to find work. Her dream was not for herself, but for Zara. She wanted her sister to go to school, to have a chance at the kind of life she could never have. To reach that dream, Amina accepted a job as a house cleaner for a very wealthy woman. That woman was Madame Chica. She was known in the city as a rich businesswoman. She wore expensive clothes, shining jewelry, and lived in a large house filled with gold decorations, glass chandeliers, and marble floors. But behind all that beauty was a heart full of pride and arrogance. She did not see her workers as humans. She saw them only as tools to serve her. Madame Chica never asked about her workers' lives. She never cared if they were sick, tired, or hungry. To her, money was power, and power meant she could treat anyone however she wished. When Amina first met her, she felt small and invisible. Madame Chica's sharp eyes and cold voice made her shiver. Still, Amina accepted the job. She told herself, I must endure this for Zara. One day, all this suffering will bring her a brighter future. And so, the story of two very different women began, one rich and proud, the other poor but full of hope. It was a bright Saturday morning when Madame Chica invited some important guests to her mansion. They were wealthy friends from the city, and everything had to look perfect. The house was decorated with fresh flowers, the silver cutlery was arranged neatly on the dining table, and the smell of expensive perfume filled the air. Amina worked harder than usual that day. She polished the floors twice, wiped every corner of the house, and made sure the tablecloth had no wrinkle. Her hands were sore, and her back hurt, but she wanted everything to be flawless. She knew Madame Chica hated mistakes, especially when visitors were around. When the guests arrived, Madame Chica greeted them with her brightest smile. She wore a long golden gown and shiny earrings that sparkled under the lights. She looked like a queen, standing tall and confident. But her eyes kept searching the room, making sure her servants were doing everything right. Amina's task was to serve tea and snacks to the guests. She carried the silver tray carefully, her hands trembling slightly. She whispered to herself, "Don't drop it, don't make a mistake." The room was full of laughter and loud conversation, and Amina felt nervous walking between the guests. Then it happened. As she bent down to serve tea to one of the ladies, her hand shook, and the cup slipped. Hot tea spilled onto the floor, and the cup rolled away, making a loud sound. The laughter in the room stopped instantly. Everyone turned to look at her. Amina's heart dropped. Her face burned with shame. She quickly bent down to clean the mess, whispering, "I'm so sorry. Please forgive me." But Madame Chica's face changed. Her smile disappeared, and her eyes turned sharp with anger. The room grew heavy with silence. Amina knew she was about to face humiliation. It was a bright Saturday morning when Madame Chica invited some important guests to her mansion. They were wealthy friends from the city, and everything had to look perfect. The house was decorated with fresh flowers, the silver cutlery was arranged neatly on the dining table, and the smell of expensive perfume filled the air. Amina worked harder than usual that day. She polished the floors twice, wiped every corner of the house, and made sure the tablecloth had no wrinkle. Her hands were sore, and her back hurt, but she wanted everything to be flawless. She knew Madame Chica hated mistakes, especially when visitors were around. When the guests arrived, Madame Chica greeted them with her brightest smile. She wore a long golden gown and shiny earrings that sparkled under the lights. She looked like a queen, standing tall and confident. But her eyes kept searching the room, making sure her servants were doing everything right. Amina's task was to serve tea and snacks to the guests. She carried the silver tray carefully, her hands trembling slightly. She whispered to herself, "Don't drop it. Don't make a mistake." The room was full of laughter and loud conversation, and Amina felt nervous walking between the guests. Then it happened. As she bent down to serve tea to one of the ladies, her hand shook, and the cup slipped. Hot tea spilled onto the floor, and the cup rolled away, making a loud sound. The laughter in the room stopped instantly. Everyone turned to look at her. Amina's heart dropped. Her face burned with shame. She quickly bent down to clean the mess, whispering, "I'm so sorry. Please forgive me." But Madame Chica's face changed. Her smile disappeared, and her eyes turned sharp with anger. The room grew heavy with silence. Amina knew she was about to face humiliation. The moment the cup fell, Madame Chica's face turned red with rage. She stood up quickly, her chair scraping the floor, and all eyes in the room focused on her. The guests sat silently, unsure of what would happen next. Amina kept her head down, wiping the spilled tea with shaking hands. She whispered, "I am sorry, madam. It was an accident." But Madame Chica's voice cut through the air like a knife. "Stupid girl," she shouted. "Can you not even carry a simple tray? Is this what I pay you for?" The room went quiet. One of the guests tried to smile politely, hoping the moment would pass, but Madame Chica was not finished. She stepped closer to Amina and pointed at her with a jeweled finger. "You are nothing but a useless cleaner. People like you belong on the streets, not in my house. Look at your dirty hands, your old clothes. How could you ever fit in here?" Her words were sharp and cruel. Amina felt each insult pierce her heart. Her eyes filled with tears, but she stayed on her knees, still trying to clean the floor. Then Madame Chica did something even worse. She pushed Amina lightly with her foot, forcing her to move aside. "Get out of my sight," she snapped. A gasp escaped from one of the guests. Amina froze. Her tears rolled down her cheeks, dropping onto the marble floor she had polished just that morning. The same floor where she now knelt in shame. No one dared to defend her. The guests exchanged uncomfortable glances but remained silent. For them, it was easier to stay quiet than to anger Madame Chica. Amina's heart broke in that moment. She was humiliated not only in front of strangers, but in front of herself. Her dignity was crushed, and she felt smaller than ever before. After Madame Chica's harsh words and the humiliating push, Amina remained on the floor. She did not argue, she did not shout back, she only lowered her head. Tears rolled down her dark cheeks, but she tried to hide them by turning away. She did not want anyone to see her broken heart. The guests returned to their conversations slowly, pretending not to notice her pain. Laughter started again, but it sounded false, almost forced. For Amina, the voices around her faded into silence. In her mind, she could only hear the sound of her own sobbing heart. She picked up the broken pieces of the cup with trembling fingers. Each shard cut her more on the inside than on the outside. She thought to herself, "Why does my life have to be like this? Why must I suffer such insults just to survive?" Memories of her sister Zara filled her mind. She pictured the little girl sitting on a wooden bench in their village school, holding a small book. Amina remembered the promise she had made. I will work, no matter how hard it is, so you can have a future. That promise was the only reason she endured the pain. But today, her spirit felt weaker than ever. She wanted to scream, to ask God why the poor were always treated as less than human. Yet, no sound came out. Her cry remained silent, hidden behind her lowered face. Her tears fell onto her hands as she continued cleaning the mess. Each drop of water mixed with the spilled tea, as if her sorrow itself was washing the floor. She swallowed her pain, telling herself that she had no choice. Though her body stayed in Madame Chica's mansion, her heart longed to be far away, somewhere she could live with dignity. As Amina wiped the last drops of tea with her shaking hands, the room was still heavy with tension. Most of the guests avoided looking at her, pretending the humiliation had not happened. They wanted to keep enjoying their food and drinks, as if her pain meant nothing. But one woman at the table could not remain silent. Her name was Mrs. Ngozi, a respected businesswoman known for her kindness and honesty. She watched the entire scene with growing anger in her heart. Finally, she placed her cup down and stood up slowly. Enough, Madame Chica, she said firmly. Her voice was calm but carried great authority. The laughter in the room stopped once more. Everyone turned toward her in surprise. No one had ever dared to speak against Madame Chica in her own house. Madame Chica's eyes narrowed. What do you mean by that? She asked coldly. Mrs. Ngozi stepped closer to Amina, who was still on the floor with tears on her face. She gently touched her shoulder and helped her stand. Then she looked straight at Madame Chica and said, This girl is not an object. She is a human being, just like you and me. Money and riches do not give anyone the right to insult or step on another person's dignity. A hush fell over the room. Some guests nodded quietly, while others shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Today you embarrassed her, Mrs. Ngozi continued, but tomorrow, life may humble you. Remember, wealth can vanish in a moment, but respect and kindness last forever. Amina could hardly believe someone was defending her. For the first time that day, her tears carried both pain and gratitude. A small light of hope returned to her heart. The room was silent after Mrs. Ngozi's words. Madame Chica, who always felt powerful in front of her guests, suddenly had no reply. Her face tightened with anger, but deep inside, she felt the sting of shame. She knew everyone had seen her cruelty. For the first time, she was the one being judged. The guests whispered quietly among themselves. Some agreed with Mrs. Ngozi, while others tried to change the subject. Madame Chica forced a fake smile, pretending the matter was small, but her pride had already been wounded. Meanwhile, Amina stood beside Mrs. Ngozi, still wiping her tears. She felt nervous, but also strangely strong. It was the first time someone had spoken for her. Her heart whispered, maybe I am not as invisible as I thought. Mrs. Ngozi turned to her and said gently, My dear, you don't deserve this treatment. If you ever need work, come to my company. I will find a place for you where you will be respected. Amina's eyes widened in disbelief. She nodded slowly, unable to find the right words. Gratitude filled her soul, and for the first time in a long while, she felt hope shining like a small candle in the darkness. Madame Chica tried to laugh and dismiss the situation, but the truth was clear. Her pride had been challenged, and her cruelty exposed. She sat down, silent and uneasy. That night, when Amina returned to her tiny room, she wrote a letter to her sister Zara. With shaking hands, she wrote, My dear sister, today I was humiliated, but God sent an angel to defend me. Soon, things will change. Soon, your dreams will come true. Her tears dropped onto the paper, but this time they were not only tears of pain, they were also tears of hope. Life often shows us two kinds of people, those who use their wealth and power to crush others, and those who use their voice to lift the weak. Madame Chica's pride brought her shame, but Mrs. Ngozi's courage gave hope to a poor girl who had nothing but dreams. Amina's tears may have fallen that day, but they were not wasted. They watered the seeds of a brighter tomorrow. She learned that dignity is more precious than gold, and even the smallest act of kindness can change a life forever. Remember this: money can buy luxury, but it can never buy respect. And sometimes, the poor who suffer silently are richer in heart than the wealthy who look down on them. So, the next time you see someone struggling, do not laugh, do not ignore, and do not insult. Instead, choose to be the voice that defends them, because one word of kindness can heal, while one word of cruelty can destroy.